Hi, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. This podcast of the People's Pharmacy is brought to you by Squatty Potty Toilet Stools. They create healthy toilet posture for fast, easy elimination. Learn more about toilet posture and health at squattypotty.com. That's SQUATTYPOTTY.com.
Millions of Americans skimp on their sleep. Is there a price to be paid for late nights online or in front of the TV? This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
Getting enough sleep is a cornerstone of good health, but sleep is not the whole story. How can active rest restore vitality?
Sleep experts often warn against daytime napping because they fear it might disrupt sleep at night. But could a good nap done right be invigorating?
Why is an active sex life considered rejuvenating? What else can we do to get the rest we need?
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, the power of rest. Why sleep alone is not enough.
First, this news.
In the People's Pharmacy health headlines, most of us have no idea how many calories there are in the meals and snacks we eat, but that could soon change. The FDA will require restaurants, pizza places, and even movie theaters to post calorie counts on their printed menus or menu boards. Some prepared foods sold in grocery stores will also be subject to this requirement, along with beer, wine, and other drinks on menus. The rules won't kick in for about a year, and during that interim, there's likely to be plenty of fighting and maneuvering to try to circumvent them. It's not clear whether such labels are very helpful in the public health fight against obesity, but restaurants in New York City have been posting calorie counts for 8 years. The requirement has not put them out of business.
Hand washing is critical for infection control. There's no controversy about that. But what's the most effective way to dry hands without spreading germs? That question has led to battles between people who champion air dryers and those who prefer paper towels. The latest skirmish occurred at the European Tissue Symposium. An infection control physician at the Leeds Teaching Hospital in England had volunteers wash their gloved hands in yogurt to contaminate them with non-toxic bacteria. They then dried their hands with paper towels, warm air dryers, or jet air dryers. The powerful jet air dryers blew a lot of bacteria up to a meter away. In a follow-up test, volunteers used black paint on their hands and wore disposable white suits. After using the jet air dryers, the suits were covered with around 230 visible spots. Warm air dryers produced 130 spots, while there were none visible after drying with paper towels. Although intriguing, the results need to be confirmed with other studies that may more realistically mimic the risk of infection.
We've all been told that liberal use of sunscreen is essential to protect our skin from aging and cancer. But could some ingredients in sunscreen be affecting men's fertility? Researchers studied 500 couples that had just discontinued their contraception in order to start a pregnancy. Each person provided a urine specimen, and the couples kept diaries of sexual activity until the woman became pregnant. Analysis of chemicals in the men's urine found that 2 benzophenones, known as BP2 and 4-hydroxy-BP, were associated with a significantly longer time to pregnancy. These compounds are found in personal care products such as antiperspirants and aftershave. They could also be breakdown compounds from sunscreen ingredients. This research is preliminary, but it does raise concern about the widespread use of endocrine-disrupting chemicals.
Scientists at the Mayo Clinic noted that people taking the strong acid-suppressing drugs called proton pump inhibitors are more susceptible to intestinal infections, such as those caused by Clostridium difficile. To find out whether such PPIs diminish the diversity of intestinal flora, they took fecal samples from 9 volunteers. The participants were given omeprazole, also known as Prilosec. DNA analyses of the samples were run at baseline, 1 week into the study, and after a month of omeprazole treatment. The hypothesis that PPIs disrupt healthy human gut microbiome was supported by the findings. The diversity of bacteria apparent from DNA analysis dropped throughout the study, and by the end of the month it resembled the reduced bacterial diversity found in the intestines of people suffering from C. diff. Fortunately, after discontinuing omeprazole, the volunteers regained gut bacteria diversity.
Doctors usually assume that if their patients would only take their medicine as prescribed, they'd get better. The problem is that only about half of all those getting a prescription follow through on it properly. Public health officials have wondered how to get people to take their medicine, and many studies have been conducted to try to solve this problem. A new analysis from the Cochrane Collaboration, an international group of highly trained volunteers, shows that too many of the studies on medication adherence are not very well designed. Out of 182 that were considered, fewer than 10% were of high quality. Even the best studies did not necessarily show that when people take their medicines, they have better health. Only 5 out of 182 trials found that enhanced adherence led to better outcomes. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week.
Welcome to this archive edition of the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. Are you getting enough sleep? If you're like most Americans, maybe not.
How much difference does adequate sleep really make? Results from a large study just published in the American Journal of Epidemiology show that people who usually slept less than 7 hours a night were more likely to die during the 8 years of follow-up.
People who were overweight, sedentary, and watched 3 or more hours of television a day were 40% more likely to die if they also got little sleep. To help us better understand the consequences of sleeping too little, we turn to Dr. Matthew Edlund. He's an expert on rest, sleep, performance, and body clocks. He's director of the Gulf Coast Sleep Institute Center for Circadian Medicine in Sarasota, Florida, and author of The Power of Rest and the Body Clock Advantage. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Edlund.
Thanks very much for having me.
Dr. Edlund, is the sleep situation in this country really as bad as the CDC says?
No, it's worse. Sleepless in Seattle came out in 1993. Now we've got Sleepless America, or rather Restless America. People think our federal budget deficit is high. Our sleep debt is that much higher. You're talking about over a third of adults sleeping less than 7 hours a night. We've knocked off 90 minutes in the last 40 years in this country. And that survey didn't even look at adolescents, which is much more of a disaster than what's happening with adults. Adolescents need about 9 hours of sleep just to learn, just to have memory, just to be able to truly function. A lot of them are operating on 7 hours. Our sleep debt is gigantic.
What are the consequences of chronic sleep loss?
People have to remember that rest is regeneration. That's how the body rebuilds itself. People think that they're the same from day to day, but they're not. When you wake up in the morning, you have a rewired, remade brain and body. People will look at an acorn and say, yeah, we know that will grow into an oak tree. What they don't see is the same thing's happening to them inside. Most of us is replaced in a few weeks. And a lot of that regeneration, a lot of that rebuilding is taking place in rest. People don't realize it, but most of their heart is gone and remade in about 3 days. If you don't get enough rest, you don't rebuild your body right.
We're talking about sleep and rest on the People's Pharmacy today. Our lines are open for your calls. If you have a problem getting a good night's sleep, we'd like to hear from you. And if you've solved your insomnia problem, well, we'd like to hear about that as well. The number is 888-472-3366. You can also email your question to joe@peoplespharmacy.com, or you can reach us through Twitter. It's @peoplespharmacy.
Dr. Edlund, we have heard things like weight control is harder if you're not getting a good night's sleep. that there are immune system consequences, so you might be more vulnerable to infection. What about memory? What about depression? What about cardiovascular risk? How does chronic sleep deprivation affect all of these aspects of our human health?
Sadly, it affects all of them adversely. If people don't sleep enough, they have more heart attacks and strokes. If people don't sleep enough, they don't remember well, which is really critical, because memory and learning, that's our basic brain earnings. That's what we're going to live on for the rest of our lives. If people don't sleep enough, they have more colds, they have more infections. There's even evidence that certain kinds of tumors go up. Basically, we need sleep just like we need food. It's necessary for our lives.
Now, of course, as soon as you say that, there are millions of Americans who are going to start worrying about getting a good night's sleep, especially those people who are having problems with insomnia. So now not only are they not sleeping well, but now they're scared to death that they're affecting their overall health, their performance. You know, somebody who has a big job thing that they have the next day, maybe a speech they have to give or they have to give a report. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. They're wide awake and they're going, Dr. Edlund said I won't be able to perform very well. Now they're going to be even more freaked out.
Right, and you've just given an example of psychophysiologic insomnia, which is the scourge of working people across the country. It's even worse now with so many people unemployed. But basically, sleep is the most natural thing that people can do. It's like breathing, it's like eating. And if people can view it as something that's really joyous rather than a job, rather than some kind of work, they will tend to do far better, because we really do remake ourselves in sleep. And that's a fantastic, wonderful thing. That gives us a chance in many ways to remake our bodies more the way we want them.
Dr. Edlund, why are so many people sleep deprived?
I think the biggest reason is because we've tended to treat ourselves like machines. And, you know, my computer doesn't particularly care if it's 4 a.m. or 4 p.m. I do. And we've got so many things going on. I mean, people are trying to do 2 jobs. People are trying to take care of their kids. They're trying to get Johnny off to soccer practice. And where do you cut the time? And the answer is generally rest. What people don't see is that rest is regeneration. And even though my computer doesn't particularly care what time of day it is or doesn't particularly care what kind of rest it gets, we do, because we need it just like food.
Every so often I hear someone cavalierly say, well, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And
that's Lady Gaga, yeah.
Presumably you'll be dead sooner if you don't sleep now,
Sadly true. Yes. Yeah, we need to rest. And the real trick for a lot of people in terms of sleep is to rest before sleep. There are surveys out there in Britain that 65% of people are looking at their emails right before they go to bed. I think that's a really bad idea. What you really want to do is have a life that fits your body's cycle. There's a time to rest. There's a time to be physically active. There's times to do things with other people. There are times to do things that are solitary. The real trick is rest before sleep. Have a ritual before sleep that calms you down so that sleep, the most natural thing you know, can just come the way it's meant to come.
What do you mean by a ritual?
It doesn't have to be religious. Basically, a lot of people have one automatically. They floss their teeth, they brush their teeth, they put out their clothing for the next day. And what I ask a lot of people to do then is do something like read, do something like listen to music. Some people will do yoga, but have downtime before you sleep. A lot of people find they're so wired up, and they're looking at their emails, and they're worried about what's going to happen the next day. And for some of those, just taking a hot bath, a very simple physical rest technique, can really make it easier to sleep through the night.
Dr. Edlund, the title of your book is The Power of Rest, and the subtitle is Why Sleep Alone is Not Enough. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could distinguish the difference between rest and sleep.
Yeah, rest is regeneration. And there's passive rest, that's sleep, sitting in front of a TV set. But then there's active rest where you take control, where you start directing your process of body regeneration. And then there's 4 major kinds. Physical rest, pay attention to your body. Mental rest, you pay attention to something going on in your head or a mental construct. social rest, which is a lot of fun for most of us and has a wonderful effect on keeping us alive longer. That's banter, that's conversation, that's being with other people. And then spiritual rest, connecting with something larger than oneself. If you can do active rest techniques during the day, and I had to devise them so they could be done in 30 to 60 seconds because people said they wouldn't take any more time than that for rest, you can really make your day more musical, more lyrical, and in the end, I think, a lot more productive.
We're going to find out a little bit more about how to do that active rest during the day. But first, let's go to the phones. Our number again, 888-472-3366.
Jane in Alexandria, Virginia, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. What is on your mind?
Hi. Well, what I'd like to know, I have nightmares almost every night, and I wondered how that affected the restorative value of sleep.
It turns out the majority of people have negative dreams. Most of our dreams are not very happy. The biggest problem with nightmares is if they wake you up and you can't get back to sleep. A lot of people can have nightmares and still surprisingly sleep fairly well, though emotionally they don't feel quite right.
Now, I have to admit, I do fall into that category. Every once in a while, like Jane, I will wake up out of a really bad dream, what we like to refer to as a nightmare, and it is hard for me to go back to sleep again. What do we do then?
The first thing you do is get out of bed, and if you can, read something that really takes you far away. I don't know what's causing Jane's nightmares. That's usually a fairly long conversation, but if you can read something that will take you into, like, historical fiction or some period or place very far from where you are, that'll often help people sleep. And then when you feel ready to go back to sleep, then you go back in. Another thing to do when you have chronic nightmares, Jane, is to try and write out what those nightmares are. And then, in about 3 or 4 sentences, change the ending. Have it so that there's a much different, happier ending, and then try to visualize that new dream. I call it pre-dreaming, and a lot of people can change their dream content just doing that.
You mentioned getting out of bed in order to do your reading. You shouldn't read in bed?
I think that beds are for sex and sleep, and that's the way they should be. And if you stay in bed and you lie in bed through the night, you're basically telling your brain, it's okay to be in bed and not be asleep. Behaviorally, that's a bad idea. If you're not sleeping in 5 or 10 minutes, please get out of the bed, and if you can, go to another room. Have it so that your bed is this secure, comfortable place for sleep.
Speaking of beds, and we only have about 30 seconds before our break, soft, firm, is there an ideal kind of bed to get a good night's rest?
The ideal bed is one that's comfortable for you and your partner. Just like people have different sleep needs, in terms of hours of sleep, they have very different desires of how they like to sleep. And just make sure you got an extra blanket for someone else.
Okay. Well, we are going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to find out why Americans talk a better game about sex than they practice. How can sex be restful? Our lines are open for your calls about rest and sleep. If you've got a question for Dr. Edlund, the number is 888-472-3366. Share your story or ask a question. You can reach us on Twitter, that's @People's Pharmacy, or you can email me, joe@peoplespharmacy.com.
You're listening to the People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
If you like the information you hear when you listen to the People's Pharmacy, you may also enjoy our book published by National Geographic. It's the People's Pharmacy Quick and Handy Home Remedies, available online at peoplespharmacy.com or at your favorite bookstore. Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible in part by Squatty Potty toilet step stools, creating healthy toilet posture for fast, easy elimination. More information about how toilet posture affects your health at squattypotty.com.
And by Redex Industries, makers of Utter Cream, an utterly smooth extra care cream enriched with urea to moisturize dry, cracked skin. 800-345-7339, online at uttercream.com.
Although you will hear calls today, we're not taking them on this archive show. Nonetheless, if you'd like to order a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. It's show number 804. That number again, 800-732-2334, online at peoplespharmacy.com.
Today on the People's Pharmacy, we're talking about rest and the health consequences of skimping on sleep. If you've got a question to ask or a story to share, you can give us a call. It's 888-472-3366. If our lines are busy, you can use Twitter at People's Pharmacy, or you can email me. It's Joe at peoplespharmacy.com.
Our guest today is Dr. Matthew Edlund, an expert on rest and sleep. He's the director of the Gulf Coast Sleep Institute Center for Circadian Medicine in Sarasota, Florida. His book is The Power of Rest, Why Sleep is Not Enough.
Dr. Edlund, we promised we were going to talk about sex, but before we do that, you also referred to this notion of short periods of rest during the course of the day, and most of us are multitasking, busy. How do we find even a minute to rest?
You find it when you find out that it really helps you be more productive. I mean, there's a lot of studies, for example, where people are given 5 minutes off from work at certain parts of the day, and they find that their productivity goes up. Take breaks or you make mistakes. Humans are not natural multitaskers. We do one thing at a time. And what you really need to be is focused and concentrated. Active rest techniques are all about getting you to get fully attentive, fully relaxed, and fully concentrated fast.
Well, give us an example of an active rest technique.
Well, the simplest things are things like deep breathing that people will often do on the job. My favorite is something called paradoxical relaxation. I kind of think of it as a perfect thing for a New Yorker. You relax by not relaxing. And what you do is very simple. You just pay attention to muscle tension. You pay attention to the difference in muscle tension in some small muscle anywhere in your body. And when people do this, they can remarkably get much more relaxed 10, 15, 20 seconds. The guy who devised it, Edmund Jacobson, was so relaxed, he used to make most people really nervous.
Now, what is the story on sex? How does it fit into the big picture of rest and activity?
Sex is a form of social rest. Sex for a lot of people is the thing that they enjoy most. And for a lot of people, it will relax and concentrate them very, very well.
I can hear people all over the country sort of either going, yay, or, oh, here he goes again. I need more sex, dear, to be able to rest.
Well, the sad part about Americans is we talk about, dream about, joke about sex a lot more than we engage in it. This is a great country. This is not the way things should be. Now, one of the problems is sleep docs are actually not really in the fore there. When they study people having sex, they usually find that it doesn't necessarily improve their sleep. Of course, those are done in sleep laboratories. I don't know that that's really the proper place for studying this sort of thing. What you can show is in animals that when they have sex, they actually grow more brain cells. And this is something that I love to explain to people in terms of active rest. If you can walk for 20 or 30 minutes, you're going to grow new brain cells. You're going to grow them in sleep, and you're going to grow them in memory areas. You're effectively going to be growing new memory storage. I can just hope that the same thing that's true of animals is true of us, and sex grows our brains too.
It seems like a reasonable hypothesis anyway.
Well, it's a good story regardless. We just got a call from a firefighter, and she has a problem because of shift work.
But she couldn't stay on the line. We don't know if the siren went off.
So what about people who do indeed have to deal with shift work?
Shift work workers will often tell you that they take one letter out of their statement of what shift work is. About a quarter of the population does it. Basically, we're biologically not built to work at night. We're built to sleep. So shift workers have more GI problems, more hypertension, more strokes. Now it seems more cancers. And the big problem in shift work is you have a day life. If you're going to work at night, you also want to have a social life. You want to have a family life. And that means something's got to give. And what gives is rest. So shift workers not only are tired all the time, but they're also more sickly.
888-472-3366 is the number if you've got a question for Dr. Edlund. We go to Dallas, Texas. Rosaline, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. What's this about your sleep problem?
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. Yes, I'm a nurse. I was just listening to the last comment. I'm a nurse. I did night duty for about 15 years, and it really affects my sleep pattern now. I'm no more doing night, but I find it difficult to sleep at night. So can I use prescribed night medication or sleep medication to get enough sleep?
Rosaline, you're working days now, and you just can't fall asleep at night?
But I can't sleep at night still.
Okay. There's a bunch of things that you can do. If possible, when you get up in the morning, try to have a morning walk. Not only does that help grow brain cells, but in a lot of women in particular, it helps them sleep at night. Second, if you can try to have an hour before you go to sleep where you really use downtime and you really calm down. Third, instead of using sleeping pills, if you really have to take a pill, try something like Tylenol or even aspirin. One of the gates that opens up sleep is a decrease in body core temperature. It's the same thing that can be induced by a really nice hot bath before sleep. And if you can even take a Tylenol and aspirin sometimes at night, that will help people sleep. But the big deal is just to have a pattern, a regular pattern that makes it easier for you to fall asleep.
Dr. Edlund, Rosaline has sort of alluded to the problem that many people have to deal with, whether they are shift workers or not, and that is what is called an imbalance in their circadian rhythm. Now, in fact, your medical center is called the Gulf Coast Sleep Institute Center for Circadian Medicine. What is circadian? Define that word. And rhythm, body clock, if you like, because there are some people, once their body clock gets out of whack, it's very hard for them to reestablish a normal pattern.
You bet. Basically, time rules life. A basic design element for all life on Earth is a 24-hour cycle, and that's what circadian means, around 24 hours. So the real trick is to just use the basic things that set us up to have a normal 24-hour rhythm, and everything changes in those 24 hours. The effect of drugs, for example, alcohol will have 2 or 3 times the effect on you at midnight as it will at 6 p.m. You want to take your drugs for cholesterol at night because that's when you make cholesterol. So the real thing that sets rhythms in this planet is light. Light is a drug. Sunlight is a wonderful thing. And if people can get up and go to bed at the same times, but particularly if they can get light in the morning, especially when they wake up closer to dawn, for a lot of people that really helps reset their body clocks.
You're listening to the People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
Dr. Edlund, Rosaline also asked about sleeping pills, and if you watch television at all, especially the evening news, you see the Luna moth come flitting in. That moth looks so appealing, and the person who is sleeping in that bed looks so happy and wakes up so relaxed. What about sleeping pills, whether it's Lunesta or whether it's Ambien or whether it's just Tylenol PM?
Basically, sleep should be an absolutely natural thing, and sleeping pills should be there for temporary use for example, people with shift work, for people who are just trying to get their body clocks back in order. But sleep by sleeping pills is generally not normal sleep. The effects of things like Ambien actually look more like the beginning of induced coma than they do real sleep. If you got to use a sleeping pill, use something very briefly. The real trick in sleep is to have a normal, regular pattern. You go to bed at the same time. You get up at the same time. You rest before sleep. That's what really works.
You're listening to Dr. Matthew Edlund. He's director of the Gulf Coast Sleep Institute Center for Circadian Medicine in Sarasota, Florida. His book is The Power of Rest, Why Sleep Alone is Not Enough. His website, therestdoctor.com.
We've got a bunch of email messages, Dr. Edlund. Bart has said, I get 6 hours of sleep and I feel okay.
Good.
Now, after so many years, it's hard to sleep more. Is this bad?
No. A lot of people will sleep much less than what seems to be the needed sleep of about 7 to 8 hours. One of my close friends sleeps 3 hours a night. He's completely functional that way. His mother is 96. She's still sleeping 3 hours a night. Some people need a lot less sleep. Some people need a lot more. In general, though, if your sleep pattern changes, that can be a warning sign. And when people start sleeping a lot longer or a lot shorter, something's going wrong.
Now, Peter wants to know, his email is eating before sleep. Is it good to increase digestive function?
No, unless you want to gain weight. I mean, first of all, sleep loss basically leads to more weight gain. There are studies now across the world when people are sleeping less than 7 hours, and particularly less than 6 hours, they gain weight. Now, if you eat at night, there's pretty good evidence not only that it's going to increase your glucose and your fatty acids and things like cholesterol a lot higher than it would, but it won't really help you sleep. So if you want to gain weight, put your calories at night. If you want to lose weight, think about putting them towards morning.
And here's another email from Connie. She says, I'm 67. I have trouble sleeping, especially when I wake up in the middle of the night. I've started using earphones to listen to NPR to get back to sleep. I wonder if having talking in my head all night affects the quality of my sleep.
As long as it's letting you fall asleep. A lot of people are sensitive to noise, some are not, but rhythm is what rules. Time rules life. Our bodies are fundamentally rhythmic. And a lot of times when people hear speech or people hear music at night, it really helps them fall back to sleep. That doesn't mean an argument, of course.
And we invite you to join our conversation with Dr. Edlund. If you have a question about sleep or rest, you can give us a call at 888-472-3366. We go to College Station, Texas. Bauman, welcome to the People's Pharmacy.
Hi.
Your question.
Hello. My question is, I have a sweet 16-year-old daughter. She sleeps 5 hours a night during the week, at most 6 hours maybe.
Right.
However, during the weekend, she sleeps till 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And
Right.
my wife thinks that this is plenty of sleep for her. Is that good enough for rejuvenating her brain?
What's basically happening is the same thing that happens with students around the world. They shirk sleep so much during the weekdays that they try to get it back on the weekend. And that is important, and you can recover some. But it would be much nicer if she was able to get more sleep during the weekend nights. And kids don't want to do that these days. I mean, they're texting, they're sexting, they're staying up with their monitors, and all that bright light is actually making their body clocks later. I would ask her to try taking an extra hour or two on the weekday nights and see if she did better. There's a lot of evidence that not only will people learn better and have better test scores and grades, but they'll also perform better in sports. The Stanford teams were given the option of sleeping 10 hours a night while they were in competition, and the swim team alone decreased their sprint times by a half a second for 15 meters. We need sleep to function. If you can convince kids by actually giving them more time to sleep that they'll perform better, very often they'll take more time for it.
Dr. Edlund, let me ask you about adolescents' particular circadian rhythms. I believe there was some research from Brown University showing that if a school delayed the start of the school day, a high school, that the students did better.
Absolutely. That's my teacher, Mary Carskadden, known in the trade as the queen of daytime sleepiness. Basically, what she said is absolutely right. Kids are going to go to bed later and get up later because they have a natural body clock like that. And if you fit that body clock, they're going to perform better. And when schools across the country, and there's been a bunch of studies now, just have later start times, the kids do better. They're also happier.
Well, I find it interesting that so many people, not just adolescents, not just teenagers, not just younger kids, but a lot of older people, too, tend to think they can make up their sleep debt on the weekend. Mm-hmm. So, somebody who's burning the candle at both ends says, well, I'll just sleep in on Saturday till 9 or 10 or maybe even 11 o'clock, and that'll solve the problem. I've now caught up on the week. Is that true?
It's partly true, but it also leads to another problem. The peak time of death in the United States is Monday morning. People sleep in late, they go to bed late, then Monday comes, and then boom. And heart attack rates go up about 5-fold on Monday mornings. So you can get some recovery sleep, but we didn't evolve with the weekend. It's much better to try and get more of that rest every night. It's remaking your brain. It's rewiring your body. This is necessary stuff, just like food, to get through the day and function. And if you get better rest, not only do you decrease your risk of major serious illness, but you also perform better.
And we do sometimes hear from people who say, well, I just wake up at the same time every day regardless.
Yes, because we really are clocked. About 35% of the population will fall asleep quickly and wake up within about 5 minutes of their alarm. We are really internally built on time. And if we use that, we can be a heck of a lot more productive.
I've got an email from David. He says, like many men my age, I'm bothered by an enlarged prostate. Consequently, I get up at night to urinate as many as 5 or 6 times. Sometimes I can fall back asleep quickly, sometimes not. How do you think this is affecting me, and what can I do about it?
Yeah, when people have a big prostate, they'll very often wake up 2-3 times. If somebody's waking up 5 or 6 times, it may be more than just the prostate. For example, middle-aged males, and I'm one of them, will tend to have more sleep apnea. And sleep apnea is another thing that will wake people up at night. If you do have that problem, you can certainly talk to your urologist. There are all kinds of medications that will tend to cause people to have less waking during the night if it's the prostate. But otherwise, if it really turns out you've got no other choice, then once again, you want to use some very simple rest techniques. You want to get up from the bed if you're not falling asleep quickly, go to another room, and read that book you should have read in high school but didn't.
Well, we want to talk more about sleep apnea, but it's time for a break.
And when we come back, we're going to find out about naps. Are they a bad idea, or can they be helpful? And what in the world is an unnap? If you've got a story or a question for Dr. Edlund, you can join the conversation. The number is 888-472-3366. You can email us, joe@peoplespharmacy.com, or Twitter @peoplespharmacy. We're talking about sleep today with Dr. Matthew Edlund.
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. If you value the health information you get when you listen to The People's Pharmacy, consider subscribing to our email newsletter. You'll get the latest health news and information on upcoming podcasts delivered to your inbox twice a week. Look for the link at peoplespharmacy.com.
Welcome back to this archive edition of The People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Squatty Potty Toilet Step Stools, creating healthy toilet posture for fast, easy elimination. More information about how toilet posture affects your health at squattypotty.com.
And by Redx Industries, makers of utterly smooth foot cream with shea butter, helping dry, cracked feet feel soft and smooth. The number's 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
We're not taking your calls today on this archive show, but if you'd like to order a CD of today's show or any other People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2424. 2334. Today's show is number 804. That number to call again is 800-732-2334, or you can find it online at peoplespharmacy.com.
Today on the People's Pharmacy, we're talking about sleep, rest, and circadian rhythms. You can join our conversation. The number is 888-472-3366. If our lines are busy, you can reach us by email. It's joe@peoplespharmacy.com or by Twitter @peoplespharmacy.
We're talking today with Dr. Matthew Edlund, an expert on rest and sleep. He's the director of the Gulf Coast Sleep Institute Center for Circadian Medicine in Sarasota, Florida, and author of The Power of Rest, Why Sleep is Not Enough. You can find him online at therestdoctor.com.
I've got an email from Darlene. She says, I have found hanging upside down on an inverted table or standing on my head, yoga position, relaxes me enough to sleep. Now, I have to tell you, if I did that, well, it would be not only dangerous, but I can't even imagine falling asleep. But could something like that help some people?
Absolutely, and yoga works for a heck of a lot of people in helping them sleep. One thing I love to do is something called gravity pose, where you're lying on the mattress, you're breathing deeply, and you're just letting gravity push your back down onto the mattress, letting you fall down into sleep. People can have thousands of different rest techniques that will help them fall asleep, and yoga's got hundreds of them.
We were talking just before the break about sleep apnea. Can you tell us what is it and what can be done about it?
Sleep apnea means stopped breathing. It means that when people go into sleep for whatever reason, usually an obstruction at the back of the throat, people don't breathe. The end result of that is more hypertension, more heart attacks, more strokes, especially in younger people. And it's usually noted by loud snoring, daytime sleepiness, people waking up with weird dreams, people waking up with a dry mouth, noting that their memory is not as good as it should be. That's the most common kind of sleep apnea. There's another called central sleep apnea, where effectively the brain stops breathing almost as if it forgot to breathe.
And what can be done for that?
All of them can be treated almost all the time, very simply with an air device called a CPAP device for continuous positive airway pressure. Basically, if you think you have sleep apnea, you go into a sleep lab or you get an outpatient sleep study, and you find out how many apneas you have, because there are a few normally for us when we're going to bed and getting up anyway. And then, if you can, the best, most effective device usually is CPAP, which is just an air splint. It blows enough air into the back of the throat so that people can breathe. A lot of sleep apnea in this country is related to weight. The fact that we don't sleep enough is another reason why we have our obesity crisis. And in fact, sleep apnea tends to make everything worse, because when people have apneas, they sleep less, they gain more weight, and they get worse apneas.
So it sounds like a vicious cycle.
Very much.
Let's go right back to the phones, 888-472-3366.
April in Burlington, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. You're a truck driver?
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question. I work third shift, and I would like to know what's the best way to transition between my weekend, which is normal everyday folks' time, and my job, which is going to work at 10 o'clock at night.
Now, did I see this correctly, a truck driver?
Yes, I am.
Long distance, short haul?
Short haul. I'm back home every night or every morning.
Yeah. Well, truck drivers actually have a lot more sleep apnea than the rest of the population. One of the things about shift work is it tends to cause you to have more weight gain, which then leads to more sleep apneas, which causes a lot of trouble. But what most people I know do when they're shifting to shifts is they try to take a nap, an hour or two in the evening before their shift. And then a lot of people will try and take some caffeine right before the shift. Caffeine's effects can last a long time. A lot of people, they last about 5 hours. And very often that can get people through the first part of the night more effectively.
Now, we hear a lot about caffeine being a problem for many people. And I'm curious, when should people stop consuming caffeinated beverages if they want to get a decent night's sleep?
It'll vary. There are some people who have been diagnosed with narcolepsy just by drinking a couple of cups of coffee in the morning. Some people are very, very sensitive to caffeine. But for most of us, if you can quit about noon, 1 o'clock, the large majority of the time it will not interfere with nighttime sleep.
I think we actually want to go back to the phones and talk to Sheila in Madison, West Virginia. Sheila, what is your question? Welcome to the People's Pharmacy.
Thank you. Hello. My question is about melatonin. I take melatonin, and I get a twofold thing. I can sleep, and also it helps raise my serotonin levels, and it's helped my autoimmune disease. But my question is vivid dreams. Is there a way to not have the vivid dreams with the melatonin, and what about giving it to children who just will not sleep?
Don't give melatonin to children. One thing that's really troubled me is a thing called lazy cakes, which is a chocolate brownie filled with melatonin and valerian. And there's been a whole bunch of kids who have been coming into emergency rooms, and they can't wake them up. Melatonin is not for children. Melatonin is a hormone. It's potent stuff. I'm sorry you have the nightmares from melatonin. A fair number of people do. Outside of just trying to write out those nightmares in a 3 or 4 sentence version, giving them a different twist by imagining a different ending, I don't know what you're going to really do about getting rid of melatonin nightmares. It may be possible over time to just not need the melatonin to fall asleep.
Is melatonin a reasonable way for people to get to sleep if they need that little extra help?
I think for a lot of people it is. It's the hormone of darkness. It resets biological clocks, and for a lot of us, that's actually a good thing because our clocks tend to get disordered by all the lights and craziness of daily life. But for some people, melatonin is really not a good idea, and they're very, very sensitive to the stuff. They'll get headaches, they'll get nightmares. Most of the time, people can probably take 1 to 3 milligrams as adults and do okay.
Now, speaking of dose, a lot of the products on pharmacy shelves and in health food stores, it's that 3 milligram dose. But in the real world, the amount of melatonin that our bodies make, it's substantially less. Mm-hmm. I've been told that even 1/3 of a milligram might work for some folks.
Not only will it work for sleep, but it turns out that what melatonin really does, and which sleep docs use it for a lot, is to change biological clocks. At that point, you're talking, yes, 0.2, 0.3 milligrams. The problem is a lot of the over-the-counter stuff is simply unregulated, and there's different amounts from point to point. You really don't know what you're getting in a lot of store-bought melatonin.
Let's go right back to the phones. Terry, we're going to Harrisonburg, Virginia.
Jessica, welcome to the People's Pharmacy.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my call.
What's up?
I have had trouble sleeping since I was a kid, but in recent years, especially in undergraduate, now I'm in graduate school, I have periods of months where I have what I kind of feel like are waking dreams. I wake up, but I can't move, and I kind of think something's going on in my room, but it kind of feels like I'm awake. What's going on there? Why does that happen? Is that common?
Yes, Jessica, that's very common. There's a phenomenon called sleep paralysis. It's very often happens when people are coming out of REM sleep or dream sleep, and they're about to wake up, but they can't, and they can't move, and sometimes they can't breathe. There's a lot of intermediate periods between sleep and wake. In fact, a lot of people have microsleeps. They're falling asleep during the daytime, which is a really big trouble in terms of driving. The CDC report that just came out showed that for 25 to 34-year-olds, and I imagine you're in that group, 7.3% will fall asleep at the wheel. So the kind of thing you're getting is happening to maybe 40 or 50% of the population will get sleep paralysis. One of the tricks there is try a real hot bath before you go to bed. That may help.
And then the other thing, I guess, is not to let it worry you so much. We knew a gentleman who thought he had been... What was it, Terry?
Well, he thought he had somebody put a bad spell on him because he grew up in Cameroon, where that is, part of the way the world works.
Yeah.
And when he got done describing it, it sounded exactly like sleep paralysis.
Yeah, well, about half the population will get sleep paralysis somewhere along the way. There's a lot of weird things that happen to us in sleep that are actually quite normal. I mean, REM sleep is one of the most bizarre things that naturally happens to a human being. The great part about it is that it drives brain development. It's really necessary to learning and memory. Even as a neonate, even before we're born, REM sleep is driving brain development. So there's a lot of good things that come with sleep, along with some of the really strange things.
I promised that we would talk about naps. So do naps play a role in resting, or do they
Absolutely.
interfere with sleeping at night? Are there any rules for napping right? And what is an unnap nap?
You mean an unnap nap? Basically, an unnap nap is what happens when you have an employer who's going to fire you if they find you sleeping on the job. And that's a pity, because Mark Rosekind and a bunch of people in the 1980s showed that when they could get people to take naps, their performance in many cases went up. And those studies were done, if you can imagine it, with pilots in the cockpit. And they were able to show that with short naps, those averaged 26 minutes, the average performance went up about 35%, and people were much more alert for the next several hours. So short naps can be really wonderful, 15, 20 minutes, and they usually will not interfere with nighttime sleep. But try telling that to a lot of employers. They just don't believe it.
And we go to St. Petersburg Beach, Florida. David, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. Are you getting enough sleep?
Hi, how are you doing?
We're well. What's your story?
Well, I feel like I'm getting enough sleep, but it's. I just wanted to know from a professional's point of view, because I get split sleep. I have a martial arts class in the evening, so I can't go to bed early, and I get up very early in the morning. So I end up sleeping about 4 hours at night, and then after my 6-hour work shift, I sleep maybe a 3-hour nap afterward. And I was wondering if that's okay.
That's shift work, and if it's working for you, please continue. I mean, it's nicer when people can get sleep in a bigger log during the night, but if it's not possible, it's not possible.
David, curious minds want to know, which martial art?
It's the reason why I have to take it at a specific time is because it's called Bagua. It's a Chinese internal martial art, and it's not offered everywhere, so I have to take this class.
Okay. Thanks, David.
I've got an email from another David in West Virginia. He says, I find that I can stay awake much longer if I'm watching television, particularly mindless television. I find the same thing to be true of web surfing. Is that because the brain is operating at a lower level than it would without the screen on? And is there research on the effect of TV on sleep?
Yeah, the effect of TV is generally to keep people up. You've got a lot of light, you've got a lot of motion, you've got a lot of activity. My mother falls asleep with a TV set, but unfortunately most of the population, it tends to keep you up. They want to keep you up. They want you to watch those advertisements. They want to keep you going. And the same thing is now true on the net. The same thing is true in terms of cell phones. These are things that are keeping people up. The light is resetting their biological clocks. It's keeping them up later and later. And yes, you can stay up later, but what are you doing to your rest? You need rest to prevent heart disease. You need rest to prevent stroke. You need rest to prevent depression. Why not give yourself enough time to rest?
Dr. Edlund, several minutes ago, we talked about the sleep difficulties of a typical middle-aged male who is having prostate problems.
Right.
What I would like to ask you about are the sleep difficulties of a typical middle-aged female going through menopause. Sleep problems are often the biggest complaint of a woman in the middle of menopause. What can she do?
It's a really tough one because a lot of women have really bad hot flushes, and that will keep you up at night. A lot of people come to me and tell me, I have to change my bedclothes every night, sometimes 2 or 3 times a night. I'm sweating so much. The big trick is, 1, be as fit as possible. 2, have a normal sleep ritual. 3, if you can, take a really hot bath before you go to sleep. Doesn't work in everybody, works in some. 4, I don't like the idea of hormone replacement therapy. I suspect in some cases for a short period of time it's not a terrible idea. The other thing that really tends to work is a morning walk. Middle-aged and older women really do better if they can get up a little after dawn or when they would normally wake up, get on some old clothes, get outside, and move. not only will that grow new brain cells, but it seems to really help people sleep later on.
We are just about out of time. Dr. Edlund, how can we tune our lives to the appropriate rhythm? How can we get the rest, that restorative rest that we all need so much?
Just remember that rest is like food. Rest is necessary for life, and rest is exciting. Rest is rebuilding your body. Rest is rewiring your body. It's something that you really need. And if you can get up at the same time, go to bed at the same time, have relatively regular times of meals, and times during the day where you actively rest, where you take 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and reset your mind and your body, that can really make the day more lyrical, more musical. You got to use your body the way it's built. Our bodies are built on time, and our bodies are built to eat and to rest. One simple rhythm, just remember 3 letters, F-A-R, food, activity, rest. Every time you eat, you move, and then you rest. If people can follow that rhythm, not only can they tend to lose a lot of weight, but they'll also be more alert during the day.
And just briefly, those active rest moments during the day, tell us 2 things that we can do to get some rest, even if it's only for 30 seconds or a minute.
Try to call a close friend, try to talk to a work colleague. Take 30 or 60 seconds just to socially connect. Only connect. Social connection is a big factor in keeping us alive. And then when things are really tough, do something really simple like just stand straight and breathe. Breathe into the count of 4, breathe out to the count of 8. Make your exhalations twice as long as your inhalations. And then imagine what you really want to do for the next hour or 2 hours. Take breaks or you make mistakes. Short breaks can make people far more productive.
Well, that's all the time we have. You've been listening to Dr. Matthew Edlund. He's an expert on rest, sleep, performance, and body clocks. He's director of the Gulf Coast Sleep Institute Center for Circadian Medicine in Sarasota, Florida, and author of The Power of Rest, Why Sleep is Not Enough, and the Body Clock Advantage and Designed to Last.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show and provided technical assistance. Al Wadarsky engineers the program. Dave Graydon edits our interviews.
The People's Pharmacy is produced at the studios of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
The People's Pharmacy theme music is by B.J. Liederman.
To order a CD of today's show or any People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 804. That number again, 800-732-2334, online at peoplespharmacy.com.
And when you go to the website, you can ask a question or share your thoughts about today's show. Look up your medicine in our drug library or check out our favorite home remedies.
Sign up for a free electronic newsletter. You'll find questions and answers, blogs, and our health news twice weekly. You can subscribe to our podcasts and have the show delivered straight to your computer. You can also share it with a friend. In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Please join us again next week.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If so, please consider taking a minute to write a review on iTunes. And thanks for listening to The People's Pharmacy.